welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to Vampires, and no, I did not expect to be back either, but it seems that a startling number of queries pertaining to Eastern vampires have reached me, and therefore I have been summoned out of torpor rather sooner than anticipated. No matter though, I am your educator, and feel free to be educated. Really, neonates, your perception on Eastern vampires is wholly different than my own. You cite Kuei-Jin, Cathayans. They are not the creatures that I remember from when I was an ancilla. Indeed, I will quite happily say that I know very little about these Kuei-Jin, and long may it remain that way. They seem like creatures with whom I have no desire to consort. That's not to say that there were not Cainites in the East. Indeed there were, just as there are legacies in Africa that, if they try hard enough, can trace their lines back to Cain. So were there clans and bloodlines in the Orient. The Ravenos, you know, they were based in India, and indeed the Nagaraja in recent nights have set up domain in parts of Korea. But there were others, the Gaki, the Bushi, the Jiang Shi. Jiang Shi was not their name when they initially migrated. They were, at one point, the Elan, and they hailed from the cradle of the earth, just as all of us did. And no matter what the Jiang Shi and the followers of Set and any other clans may tell you, we all hail from one homicidal farmer. Or at least that is one opinion, that is my opinion, and so that is the opinion you are getting. So why have you not heard of these Jiang Shi? Perhaps in these nights they are of no great number. Maybe they have been wiped out entirely. I somehow doubt that. Their skills for obfuscation were, well, enough to rival a Nosferatu, shall we say. Oh, and how they despised the Nosferatu. Truly, the Jiang Shi were pivotal, their role in Europe as it is today. You may not know this. The Mongols, of course, travelled west. They were, in part, controlled by the machinations of the Andar, a gangrel bloodline. So the Khans and the Andar and other Cainites moved west with the Mongol horde, but not just to conquer and pillage and raze and lay waste to whatever they surveyed, because they were fleeing. Yes, they were fleeing the east, because it had suddenly become inhospitable to them. For while we divided lines between high clan and low clan, there were only one high clan in that part of the world at the time, and that was the Jiang Shi, the Yalan as I once knew them. I only met one of them in, I suppose, what we would consider the Dark Ages, a male by the name of Feng. Now truly the Jiang Shi are an aberrant clan or bloodline. Whether indeed they are a clan or a bloodline, I could not say. They share two of the disciplines of Clan Assamite, read into that what you will, but they have their own unique power too. This clan has an ability to move without sight. By that I mean they share the celerity of Bruja, of Toreador, of Assamite. However, they do not appear to move fast. They merely appear here, and then here, and then here, and then here. I know what you're thinking. I've told you of the true Bruja before, and perhaps this is some gift of Temporis. I would say not so. I would say it ties into their curse. For you see, the Jiang Shi are frighteningly immobile. They are rigid. Part of their curse is that as they get older, they just grow stiffened, which seems comical, it would, except by using their discipline, and using their celerity, and their obfuscation, they can lay in wait like spiders. They can just be there at one moment, stood upright, rictus grin, legs completely straight, for they cannot bend without great difficulty and pain. And all of a sudden, it'll be right in front of you. Or the Jiang Shi will use his obfuscation and will just hide, and oh, they have patience. It is rumoured that they fear the night at times. They fear resting during the day as well, for they are afflicted by nightmares. I don't believe that is the affliction of the Jiang Shi. I believe that is something that the Bushi suffer more, but we will get onto them at another point. The Jiang Shi do have the great patience and capacity to just stand stock still. And this Feng fellow told me all about it. He told me how in an act of meditative trance he could lay in wait along a road or in a castle or anywhere, not even having to be in shadow, not even having to be concealed, and no one would pay any heed to him, standing upright like a tree in the forest, and yet dead and rotten from within. And as soon as his prey moved by him, the feeding practices of the Jiang Shi are not to be replicated, I can assure you of that. Maybe you have heard of Isabel Giovanni and her proclivity for decapitating mortals and drinking from the stump or the skull. I can assure you that is a rumour. When the Jiang Shi are concerned, and the way they feed in a rather similar kind of a way, it is no rumour. So you may question how the Jiang Shi are able to uphold their humanity. Well, meditation, my dear neonates. They spend an awful lot of their time in thought. Before the Sabbat ever came up with their paths of enlightenment, I believe the Jiang Shi had honed their own. A path of the Predator, I believe the Gangrel and some of the Anda brought some of it over as well. Path of the Grey Walker or something along those lines. I cannot say that the Jiang Shi were the progenitors, truthfully, but they certainly practice a code very similar to it. They are consummate predators, but in a, as I say, a spider kind of a way. They will just lurk. They will lay their trap. They will sit in the middle of their web, and they will just wait for someone to walk within it, at which point, blink out of existence, and bam, in front of you, and its ever so long fangs will be ripping into your throat. But the history of the Jiang Shi, well, the Elan, they were known for their decadence when I was a neonate. We considered it decadence, we other neonates and the ghouls and so on, because we did not truly understand their weakness. They struggled to move. They simply struggled to have the capacity to move their limbs and therefore gain motion on their own. And so it was a great habit of the Elan to make herds and retainers and have all kinds of ghoulish servants to carry them around on chairs, sedan style. They would be lifted and they would be carried to and fro. They would greet other kings and emperors and the like, and that is how they would be transported. We always thought that it was because of a great laziness that afflicted them, or perhaps a great pride that did not allow their feet to touch the ground. But now, well, since meeting this Feng, I was convinced since that it was because of this curse, whether it was through Cain or some other means, or because of some great act that they had perhaps perpetrated against your Kuei-Jin. Maybe they were afflicted with a form of paralysis, and only through the expenditure of blood were they able to move with their celerity. Perhaps this is why they are known as being ever so hungry. For in order to move at all under their own steam, they need to drink. So they surround themselves with vast herds. Frightening as well, their rictus grins. Sometimes they just can't help it. Spend a point of blood, they can appear almost normal. Without, they appear like scarecrows in a field. Their own discipline of Tao Ti is, well, perhaps the worst thing of all. The Lamia, who I have not covered in detail, a bloodline of the Cappadocians, had the ability to convey foul humours through their fangs. I believe they perhaps learned that in concert, not just from Lazarus, but also from these Jiang Shi, for they had a very much poisonous bite. It also goes to follow the Assamites' particular disciplines of poisoning the well of blood. Perhaps there is a connection there after all. The Jiang Shi are also, they can also augment their celerity with the ability to jump, to bound, to trampoline. They do not always have to disappear, they can practically fly, but it is more of a bound from one step to the other. Again, it seems comedic until you see it, and until you see the force with which they land, enough to splinter a man's skull and penetrate his body with their heels until they reach the hip. You would not credit it without seeing it, I assure you, but their tactics are bizarre, and perhaps honed due to the environment that they dwell within. Their existence in these final nights is dubious at best, and I would half wish that they are indeed exterminated, that your Kuei-Jin have removed them entirely, for they are frightening. They preyed upon the Mongols, and the Mongols fled. Can you imagine Genghis Khan fleeing from anyone? Can you imagine his vampiric masters fleeing from anyone? And yet, there they were, a row of 100, maybe 200, Jiang Shi, all stood stock still like terracotta soldiers, fixed grins upon their faces, legs out straight, and yet, with just the blink of an eye, they could be in front of you, or worse still, completely out of sight. Where would that Jiang Shi be hiding, with their gifts of Tao Ti celerity and obfuscation? Ooh. Truly a perturbing bloodline. Maybe not what you were seeking, but on the other hand, I do wish they do exist. For in these nights, well, it would seem a shame for any bloodline to be truly extinguished. The Salubri have clearly proven persistent, as have the Cappadocians through we harbingers. The Jiang Shi, if they travelled west at this time, perhaps seeking aid from the Kuei-Jin, who have no doubt been laying waste their territory of old, if they have not formed alliance or just hidden from them, but I do not believe that Jiang Shi pride can allow them to hide for long. Who would they go to for aid? The Camarilla? The Sabat? The Ashira, perhaps? Or maybe even the Inconnu or True Black Hand? Who can say? Who can say? Again, pride comes before the Yalan with great propensity. They are not going to ask for help. They will wait until someone considers them useful, and perhaps die to a man before they beg for assistance. What else is there to say of the Jiang Shi? Well, I'll tell you this little anecdote that I have heard. One of the antediluvians that exist in the Shadowlands, one of the Namtaru they are sometimes referred to, or Aralu, I have on good authority, is an ancient member of this clan or bloodline, perhaps third generation, perhaps fourth. So maybe the Eastern Cainites do have some connection to the True Black Hand after all, and perhaps they've just been biding their time. What is their relationship to Cain, to their forefathers? All I know is that they were cast out and cursed in the exact same way as the rest of we 13. That does not necessarily separate them from any other bloodline, Bali, True Bruja, Kierseed. Something must have created them, and yet for as long as I recall, they have always been. And yet, we kindred of the West. Mithras Kingdom. If you are to the east of Mithras Kingdom, of the British Isles, you are Eastern. If you are to the west, you are Western. If you are not, you are Central. What a powerful Ventru can convince all of us. Well, think of how our powerful elders have also convinced us to forget completely the acts and the abilities of the Jiang Shi. Why would they want us to? Perhaps they fear them. Perhaps by striking their name from records, they feel that the Jiang Shi's ire will never be roused, that they will never appear in the blink of an eye again within a domain and demand some foul penance from us. We abandon them to the Kuei-Jin. as they grew in number, no doubt the Jiang Shi reduced. Did we ever offer assistance? No, it is not the Cainite way. But how do you think that has left that ancient group of vampires, those Yalan, to feel? Vengeance? Hungry? Not too dissimilar to harbingers of skulls, I imagine, but perhaps even more frightening.